So we did have a question come in before we get into stand up about a question in Free Code Camp, and it was around input patterns. Let me just pull that up. And I will share the screen.
We're on week 5, just asking real quick, right?
Yes, week 5, day 1. This will be our first week of computer science. Then we take a break for a week and do DevOps. And then we have 3 more weeks of computer science and front end JavaScript after that. Okay, so the question was with type password, you can use the pattern attribute to define a regular expression that the password must match in order to be considered valid. So regular expressions are one of those things that everyone just loves to hate because they are really complicated. But a regular expression basically accomplishes a goal of saying, hey, does the text that has been typed in meet this pattern? And the pattern syntax is called a regular expression. And so regular expressions can be kind of complicated to write. But in this example, they're saying that they are looking for the letters A through Z and then the digits 0 through 5. And that must be accomplished 8 times, basically. So that's what it says. And then it says, make then remove the min length attribute and try it out. So the min length attribute is going to be the 8 here, right? It's saying, hey, we want you to modify this so that you can type in any number of characters and have it valid. Yeah, that's all they're saying. So regular expressions are basically just a way to say, does this text match a pattern? And regular expressions are kind of interesting because they are somewhat of an industry standard. So we use regular expressions in JavaScript, in HTML, in Python, in Ruby. All of them support regular expressions. And that is just a way to say, hey, I'm trying to match a certain pattern in this text, or I'm trying to make sure my password requirements are met. So if you've ever been on a page that says you must have a special character, it must be over 8 characters, you must have an uppercase letter, a regular expression, or a regex or regex, I've heard it both ways, is what allows you to enforce that. So we won't touch on regular expressions too much, but they are something that is very powerful. Desiree, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. And if you're working on Free Code Camp and ever have questions, always feel free to ask them at the beginning of class. You will see I've linked to Free Code Camp and the Odin project. So if you don't like one, some people like the other one more. The Odin project, I will drop a link in the chat, is just another alternative, and has gotten really good reviews, specifically on the JavaScript side of things. So if that is something that you are interested in, you can definitely take a look at that stuff and get some practice over there. I don't know if it will let me link to this. Let me see. Yeah. So the second link is specifically at the JavaScript stuff, but if you scroll up a little bit, you'll see that they cover Flexbox, CSS foundations, HTML stuff, all things that we've been diving into. And then on the Git side of things, Nathan will actually be covering that next week. So slightly different order there, but lots of good practice over there. So with all of that said, before we jump into JavaScript and stand-up, we need to install Xcode onto your computers because tonight's the first night that we'll actually install Node and run some Node scripts write some node scripts and actually execute them. However, the Xcode download is notorious for being taking forever. So I want to get that kicked off before we dive into stand up. So I just copied a command. What you are going to do is hit Command Space on your computer and open up Terminal. Type in the word terminal and hit enter. And you'll get this white box that pops up, or if you're in dark mode, it's probably in black. And you are going to go ahead and copy from the chat the command, or you can type it in. It's Xcode, all one word, -select -install. And if you're not sure if you've already installed this or not, it will tell you that you already have it installed. There's no harm in rerunning this command. It won't make you re-download it or do anything like that. I already, oh, no. Did you get a command not found?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, mine didn't work either.
Yeah.
Okay, stand by.
Just reminds me of college all over again.
Okay, never mind. Slightly different variation. Sorry, my notes appear to be a little out of date. Xcode -select -install. That's what we're going for. And if you already have it installed, you'll get this message that it's already installed. If not, it will probably give you a pop-up. At that point, you just hit yes or download or install or whatever it says, and then it should take a minute and get that process going. Hopefully that's going a little smoother. Cool. All right.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna
Yeah,
say
go
for
for it.
mine, what is it? I did the I copied and inputted the code line. I was saying Xcode select no. Install requested for command line developer tools. I
You
was
check into
wondering.
the prompt popped up. You should click
Oh,
install.
okay, let me see. Prompt. Oh, yep, there it is. It just hit itself. Thank you.
You're welcome. I had the same question, like, where is it?
Okay, now that we've got that install going and in process, another question?
Yep, mine's is still saying code not found. Command not found.
You have Xcode -select -install.
Oh, space dash dash install. Okay.
Anyone else need help? After you run the command, you'll get a little pop-up, and then you can do the install from the pop-up. Okay.
All right. I'm
With
good.
all of that said, let's kick off with stand-up. What did we learn last week? What are some concepts that we're feeling strong about? What are some things in HTML that we feel like we need some additional resources? How are we feeling heading into JavaScript?
For me, I'll say definitely keeping track of divs is very important, especially doing it like hard coding, because if you don't really properly like put in comments and stuff, which I think we talked about this like second week or third week, that having comments is very important so you know what exactly is going on. So if you want to do a certain change to a certain section of a website, you know where exactly to look for.
Yep, for sure. And we get into those nested divs, right? And being able to keep track of columns inside of rows that are inside of columns that are inside of parent rows, all very important. And why I highly encourage you to do that visually, right? So now that you're getting to that wireframe stage of your capstone, very important for you to start visually breaking that up and going, all right, before I write a single div out, I need to understand what columns are inside of rows that are inside of other columns, so that when I get to that div stage, I'm not going to freak myself out when I lose track of one of them and the whole layout breaks. Joe.
So I was actually working on my portfolio a little bit over the weekend. And something I kept coming across was uh, it was not necessarily difficult, but very tedious to continue to override bootstrap elements. Um, I don't know if that comes with like experience and you're just like, oh, I know what they're using for all their classes, or if it's just a pain in the ass all the time.
Um, yes and no. You learn what is easier to override and what will always be a pain. So things like overriding the grid layout can be really challenging, especially when you're trying to do margin and padding and you can't figure out, like, I just want a little bit more margin. Why is it breaking this way? Oftentimes, the right solution is to do what they call a wrapper, right? Which is, instead of putting my own class on the same div that the column is on or the row, instead what you do is you make another div and you call it like my col wrapper and put your content inside of that. And then when you are modifying that CSS, instead of modifying the properties that Bootstrap is set, instead you're kind of modifying inside or on top of, instead of overriding exactly what's in Bootstrap. That's only the case though for the grid system, right? So there are other things like buttons, where buttons you're like, I want to change the color of that button, and you have to know that exact property in order to override it. At which point the dev tools in your browser can be really helpful, because you can right click and inspect in them and go, oh, the reason why I'm not overriding it is I'm using background color and they just use background, right? Or it's probably a crappy example, but something there where you can dive in there. And then the final thing I'll say about that is that important keyword can be really helpful. All right, I've tried everything here and nothing else is working. Let me just try important, and sometimes that will get it to work as well.
Yeah, I was doing it with the nav bar.
Nav bars are probably the thing that you think will be the easiest to make and is often the hardest. So if that is any kind of redemption for you, nav bars are really, really hard to make, especially when you try and make them responsive or get to the point where you're going, all right, I've got stuff on the left, but I've got multiple things here, and then I also have some stuff I want on the right, and then I want certain stuff to collapse as well. Nav bars are just one of those hard things to do. So if you are not feeling confident about your HTML yet, I would actually recommend saving your nav bar for one of the last things you do on your first page. Get all of the rest of the page done, and then go, all right, well, now I need a nav bar to get to the next page on my site, and circle back with it that way. But if you are reaching a point of frustration, if you're saying, like, I really just can't get this to work, I feel like I'm just banging my head against the keyboard, at that point, that's what those one-on-ones are for, right? Those one-on-ones are for helping you through that, going through the individual cases and pushing through. So I don't want you to think you're alone, both in terms of nav bars being challenging, but also in you do have support through those one-on-ones. Or you can send me a zip in Slack and be like, I don't understand why this isn't working. And I'll get back to you asynchronously, usually within a day or two. Anything else from last week or HTML in general?
Well, I definitely know the importance of rows and columns from yeah, yeah, from earlier. So um there's that, and also to like check oh, and inputs. I learned that definitely something with like inputs and radios are useful for like making forms and stuff, especially like a feedback form.
Yeah, and once we get into more full stack development, now that we're getting into JavaScript and making things interactive, you're going to see we're going to be working with buttons and inputs a lot more now, because we are progressing past websites and truly getting into web apps, right? And web apps are more interactive. They're going to have like I said, a lot more JavaScript in order to say, all right, now that the user has done this thing, what is the computer supposed to do? We will get into building tic-tac-toe and a couple other projects there. But this first week is all about kind of more computer science principles, more terminology, more syntax. And then we only have a couple days of that, and then we're back in project-based, hands-on building practical things. So that is what is coming down the pipeline. Anything else? Okie doke. Did anyone have problems with their Xcode installs? Did everyone's finish? We aren't installing all of Xcode, just the command line tools. But now that we have those command line tools installed, we can get some stuff rocking and rolling.
Yeah, mine's is done and complete.
Cool. All right, so we are going to move on to installing something called Homebrew. And before I paste this command in, I'm going to run it myself to make sure that it still works. Okay, so command coming your way. And if that does not copy, no, that should copy, right? So go ahead and copy that, paste that into your terminal. And what it's going to do is it's going to say password, and it shows you this little key here. It is asking for your Mac password, but it will not look like you are typing anything in. You actually are. So whenever you type a password into the terminal, for some legacy terminal security reasons, it won't show you that characters are getting typed in. So when you are typing in your Mac password, it will not show you that any input is happening, but when you hit enter, it will actually take the password. So when you're at this point, it doesn't matter how many characters you type in, as long as you get your password right and hit enter on that, it should take you to the next step of installing. So it should bring you to this screen after you hit enter on your password. And it says it's going to install all of this stuff. The existing directory will have blah, blah, blah. Go ahead and hit enter to start the install. Go ahead and hit enter on that and give it a second to run.
You said it's the password we use to log into our laptops.
Correct. It's your Mac password, not your Apple ID password. Austin, I will copy and paste that for you. Once you have that install done, you are going to run two more commands. One and two.
Just asking, when putting in this previous command, you just press enter to get it downloaded?
To run it.
Right.
Yes.
All right. I'm ready for the next step. I'm sorry.
You're good.
Where are we copying and pasting this again?
This is
please?
going into terminal. So right here, just paste that command right in there and then enter to run it. And that one has a quote error too. Come on. Google Docs hates terminal commands. Sorry, give me 1 second. I will fix these. Sorry, if you have errors, give me 1 second. I will get it fixed.
When you mentioned homebrew, I thought you meant like a different homebrew.
No, this homebrew is for installing developer tools. You know what? Let's just try this. If you open a hit Command N to open a new window, type in the word brew, BREW, and hit enter. Does that look like this, or does it say command not found?
Mine says command not found.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. So these two are the ones we put after. So echo and
Hold off on that
evil.
echo one, because that one's got errors on it.
Okay. So what about the one below it?
Hold off on both. Just the one for installing homebrew. I gotta fix the Z profile one.
Understood.
Okay, give that one a try. So you're gonna take that command and copy it, paste it into your terminal, and hit enter. Once you do that, you are going to close that terminal window, do a new window, and just type in brew enter. And once you do, hopefully you get this. If you've made it to this step, sorry for screwing all of that up, but that should be it. So 3 steps here. I will put them in the chat. One for installing, which requires your password. After you install, you're going to Austin, because you were late, I already mentioned this. When you're typing your password in, it actually is receiving the characters. It just doesn't show it. So if you type it in and hit enter, it will advance you into the next step or tell you that your password is wrong and give you another chance to re-enter it. But the characters don't show up while you type any password into the terminal.
Also, for the what you just posted, the command line, I copied it and put it in the terminal. Nothing really happened.
Yeah, it didn't happen
That's
for me
fine.
either.
Close the terminal, reopen it, and then run the command brew. So I just put the 5 steps in. You don't need to redo any of these steps if you've already done them. The first one is going to be installing brew. I think all of you have gotten past that point. The second one is a copy and paste of that eval command. Once you hit enter, it's not going to look like anything happened. That's okay, it actually did. Close the terminal, reopen your terminal, type the word brew in, hit enter, and if you get the example usage, you have survived your first terminal experience. If it is not working for you, raise your hand. We'll share your screen. We get everyone through this, I promise you. Joe.
Alrighty, let me do this here. All right, you can see it here. I don't know where Zoom's chat just went.
So you're good there. So go ahead and close that window. Reopen the window, Command N, or that works too. and then type the word brew in. Okay.
So wait, so what I did was I copied the the evaluate thing, but I didn't close the terminal. I like put brew and it worked for me.
Yeah, that means the next time you open the terminal, though, it won't work.
Mm.
So, okay, let me. Once you get brew installed, it is really smooth sailing, but until then, it is a pain in the butt. Okay, so slightly different command I just sent for step number 2. And then go retry the rest of the steps after that. So I'm going to try it, Joe, on your screen before. Maybe no, I'm not. Can you go to the Zoom chat and copy number 2?
I have it copied. Or it should be. Hang
Go
on.
to paste that in.
Nope, maybe not. Let me try this.
You're missing the last part of that command.
Oh. Like a whole line delete.
Control C will bring you to a new line if it's focused in the terminal. Okay, enter on that. Okay, close the terminal window, reopen the terminal window, and type in the word brew.
What's the shortcut that I can open from another one? I guess I just do
Command N.
Command N, just Command N. Okay. And then brew.
And then type in the word brew. Yep. Okay, that's what we're going for. You're good to go there. Sorry, it took me a couple times to get the right command. Harley.
I still can't get past the first part, so I will
Okay.
my screen.
Okay, let me quest remote. Okay, and we're gonna go to this is the first one. Go ahead and type in your Mac password and hit enter on that. Okay, enter to continue. Okay, then we're gonna do this one. And this one. And then we're going to close, reopen. Get back here. And then we're going to type in brew. And it works, so you are good to go.
Thank you.
Does anyone else not have the brew command working? I know that this can be frustrating. Cornelius, go ahead, share the screen.
Yep.
Okay, so we are going to request remote.
Yep.
So were you able to get through the first step where it entered the password and
Yes.
installed everything? Okay. So go
Yeah.
ahead into chat and copy that echo command. Unfortunately, Zoom doesn't let me see the chat.
That is not Zoom. I have like the how do I because I'm sharing screen.
Up at the top, there should be a chat button up there, and if not, it will be under more.
Oh, wait, there it is. All right, so copy this,
Set
right?
the echo command to the Z profile. Copy that whole line. And then paste it. And enter. Okay, now we're gonna close your terminal, which I can do, and we're gonna reopen your terminal. And then we're gonna type in the word brew, and you're good to go.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else need help?
My Xcode is taking ridiculously long to download, so I don't think I'll even be able to continue on.
That is unfortunately not surprising. And Xcode does take absolutely forever. If you aren't, I would copy those 5 steps into like a note on your computer so you have them. Unfortunately, you might run into what I just ran into where they like change the quotes on you. Hopefully they don't do that, but if you have any problems with those 5 steps after you get your Xcode downloaded, schedule a one-on-one with me as soon as possible, and we can run through those steps.
Okay, we'll do.
Okay. Now that we've got Brew installed, we are over the worst of it. We can now install Mo, it's not Xcode, it's the Xcode developer tools. But if you got Brew successfully working, then you already had that installed from the previous cohort and you're good to go. Okay. Now that we've got Brew installed, in your terminal, the same one that you ran the brew command on, and it actually is working, you can now type in brew install node. And after you run that command, mine may look a little different, but it should say node installed. If it does, you can test it by typing node-v. Node space -v and hit enter. If it returns a number, any number, you successfully survived your first terminal interaction, and we will now go run screaming from the terminal. If it says it's already installed or it's updating it, that's totally fine. It doesn't matter what node version we're on here. As long as we got some node version installed, that's what actually matters. So it is, again, brew install node. And then it is node space -v. If you get any version number coming out after node space -v, you have successfully installed Brew, which is a tool for installing developer tools. And you have installed Node, which is a JavaScript runtime specifically built for servers that allows us to execute JavaScript. Does anyone not have a node-v working who successfully made it through? Yes, any version is fine. 22.1 is probably the best case scenario. Anything above 14 is really all that really matters. Everyone good? No, Harley? Go ahead, share your screen. Node space -v. You're good to go.
I need some help.
Yeah, go excuse me.
One second. So I did all of those previous steps, and I did type brew at one point, and
Yep.
it worked. But oh, like that
Yes.
happened. But then when I did brew install node, it said no command found. Oh, now it'll work. Okay.
My mother calls that Mac syndrome. I think it's colloquially known as mechanic syndrome. I swear the car was making the sound.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, no problem. Anyone else, Safi?
Yes, so I just have a later version. So I have 20.12. How can I get 22?
You have sorry, you said 20.12?
Yeah, 20.12. I saw like Harley had 22.
You can try brew, it's either brew update node or brew upgrade node. It's one of the two. But you won't have any differences in the versions. So if you can't figure out how to get it updated, that's totally fine.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyone else?
It's brew upgrade.
Thank you. Which is really annoying because once you do the upgrade and start working in Node, it's update. But anyway. Okay, last call for help. And Safi, worst case scenario, if that doesn't work, I would do a brew uninstall node and then a brew install node, and that will really like force it to take out the old version before it puts the latest version in. Okay. Now that we've got that done, we are actually going to go through a couple slides.
I'm so sorry. Can I share my screen just to show what?
Yeah, go for it. The link for the slides or a different link?
Sorry, brew, just because I came late, I don't know what brew is. So if it was something we installed, I just need that because I can't see previous.
All right, so after putting brew upgrade node, it just said that it's not, which is concerning. But I went through all of the steps.
Okay, let's just try this. Oh, go ahead and open system settings. And then the little toggle for Zoom. Did it not open?
It didn't.
Oh, okay.
Would it be under?
It's accessibility. And then Zoom, just toggle that one on. And then Mac password if it asks for it. And I think I'm in. Oh, sorry.
No. Any luck?
Yes, I'm in. Okay, let's try. Come on, Brew, wake up. You can do it. Okay. Then
I wouldn't mind getting back to you on how this
You
thing
just
works.
reach the end.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
I just want to make sure that it's not going to air out at the end and say you have a different version of Node installed, so we won't overwrite that one, because basically there are multiple ways, and this is good for everyone to hear. There are multiple ways of installing Node, and so Brew is probably, even though Brew is a pain to get installed, you'll use Brew the rest of your professional career, as long as you're on a Mac, and so that's the reason why we install Node this particular way, is so that you have those dev tools already installed and set up. And don't worry, we do a class on the terminal later on. And so the terminal is something that just takes time, and we try and guide you through that experience. Of course, my notes got screwed up, and that is often something that happens when you copy and paste terminal commands, is that one quote will turn into a double quote accidentally, or your word processor will put smart quotes in, which are basically slightly curved quotes, and that can break everything as well. I thought it was at the end because it did Node. All right, I'm going to let this run and then just get back to me if you have any problems. After this, it should just be Node space -V, and that should solve the problem.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Question,
Tiffany.
Max.
I'll come back to you, Mel. Tiffany, you're up next.
Actually, I have the same question with her as I try to update the node, try to use the command line, brew update node, but it say re-updated, but when I check it, the version is still in the old one.
Okay, so what we did was brew uninstall node and then brew install node.
Oh, so you want me to uninstall it first and then install again? Okay, sure.
Yes. Mo, what's up?
Mine was kind of a similar thing. Like, I know I did it correctly, but when I checked the version, it's saying 20.13. But then when I install it, it's saying 22.1.0. So I didn't know if that mattered or not.
I'm on 22.1, so that's fine. There's really no difference between the older version and the newer version. The only differences there are going to be in features that are like so advanced that I don't use them. So if you are on an old version of Node, I would really not sweat it, because those upgrades are not something that we will touch on in the next 6 months of curriculum. And chances are, unless you are working with a senior developer who is developing Node itself, chances are you won't be using those features either. So if you're on an older version, I really wouldn't sweat it. Most production servers are all the way back on Node 18, and so you will most likely be fine on an older version. It won't cause any problems.
Cool.
Okay. For the sake of time, I am going to dive into some slides here. I did paste a link into the chat if you are someone who likes going through slides better.
I know full screen can get funky. Can you guys see those slides? Okay. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what is JavaScript. After we went through all of those installs, it was kind of nice to have some context there. We know HTML is a markup language. What do we mean by markup? Well, we've got some content, and then we go in and we mark that up with all of our tags, right? And then CSS is a style sheet language. So we're using all of that markup to write selectors and apply styles to those selectors, right? Well, JavaScript is different. It's not a markup language. It's not a not a style sheet language. It is what we call a scripting programming language, and it was initially built to run in the browser. I know I've said this before. I would say it until I'm blue in the face. Java and JavaScript are not the same language. If you ever are working with a recruiter who uses those two terms interchangeably, please run screaming from that company. Not the same language. They can be used to build similar outputs on the server. The difference is Java does not run in the browser, at least not natively. JavaScript does. JavaScript runs in almost every web browser. The technical name for JavaScript is ECMA or ECMA script. It's often abbreviated to ES. And then it's either the year that ES version came out or the version number. So oftentimes you'll see ES6 or ES 2015. They mean the same thing. At a certain point, they started transitioning away from one and to the other. I think they're using more of the version number now than the year that it came out. But ES6 is not the latest version of JavaScript, but it was the one that brought the most number of features into JavaScript. And so that is the version that we'll be teaching you. The nice thing is that JavaScript is always backwards compatible. So there may be newer features in ES7 or 8 that we won't necessarily cover, but everything, all of the code that you wrote in ES6 will also work in ES7 and 8. So it's not like you're writing outdated code. It just means that you may not be using the absolute latest functions and features built into the language. It was built in 1997. It's the prominent programming language for the browser ever since, because other than HTML and CSS, it is the language that is pretty much guaranteed to work no matter what browser you're using or what device that you're running that on. It's one of the major reasons that Steve Jobs killed off Flash when the iPhone came out, which was a big battery hog. He was a big proponent of JavaScript because it was code that just worked in every browser. And so that is what we will be learning and diving into. So some other terms that you may have heard of. Node, right? We just installed Node. Node is a JavaScript runtime usually used to build server-side applications. So we'll be using it to run our JavaScript before we switch over to learning how to make JavaScript run in our browser. You also installed Node Package Manager when you installed Node. Node Package Manager is a repository of packages, think plugins or extensions or frameworks that are essentially pre-built JavaScript code that is built for us to use it in our own code. And then we also just installed Brew. Brew is similar to NPM, but it's not specifically for Node. Brew is used to install any kind of developer or command line or terminal-based Mac applications. So we will, you can use Brew to keep Git up to date. You can use Brew to install all kinds of helpful commands there. It's a really fun one called SL because LS stands for list, something that we'll learn about down the road. But if you install SL through Brew, you get a steam locomotive that comes through your terminal instead of just listing out all your files. Anyway, we'll have fun with that down the road. So we just installed Brew. These are the commands that I probably should have copied and pasted from. But anyway, we've now run those. So we are going to talk about the console a little bit. So the console is the way that we see what our code is outputting. That's never been a problem up until now because we've always had HTML and CSS, right? That's where everything we've seen in the browser. But when we use Node, our JavaScript will print out into the terminal. So in a second, we're going to get into the terminal in VS Code and actually start seeing the output of our first JavaScript. When we run our code in the browser, there is also a console, but that console will be in the dev tool section. So we've seen the elements a little bit, and we've started to see the margin and how all of that plays out. But there's another tab in the dev tools called console that we will be able to see where that is outputting. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and write our first JavaScript and get some output. So I am going to head into VS Code. I'm going to File, Open Folder, and in my code, go ahead and create your week 5 folder and your day 1 folder, and go ahead and pop that open. And for our first file, we actually aren't going to make HTML or CSS. We are going to make our first file called playground.js. That .js is really, really important. I will also start a live share with you guys. We aren't going to be writing a ton of code tonight, so the live share is probably a little less important, but it's always helpful to follow along, so feel free to do that. Once you get all of that set up, we are going to do another new step that we have not done. We're going to go up to terminal up at the top and go down. Nope, sorry. We're going to right click on the file over on the file browser, and we're going to open an integrated terminal. And that will pop open a terminal down at the bottom. Like I said, we're going to get into terminal usage more down the road, but for now, we're going to keep it as short as possible. So the new step that we haven't done before, right click on Playground and click on Open an Integrated Terminal. That will pop open a window down at the bottom.
What's the difference between right-clicking and opening an integrated terminal on the file versus the Explorer?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
I was afraid it was going to do something differently. The benefit of doing it over here is that when you do open an integrated terminal, the terminal opens in whatever directory you basically right-clicked on the file on, compared to when you go terminal, new terminal, it will open it in whatever folder you have open. In this case, they're exactly the same thing. So there isn't any difference there. But I was afraid that if you did new terminal, it would open the terminal in your home directory, not in the day folder that we just created. That's not actually the case. So there's no difference.
Oh, I meant in the Explorer versus the file. If you just clicked on like the white space in the Explorer tab versus like the file itself. But I'm assuming it's the same thing.
For opening the terminal?
Yeah, like if you just like pull your mouse down like an inch into like the white space in the Explorer tab and just right click there.
Oh, does the same thing. Okay. Now
sorry, I was trying to, you said you did open terminal?
Yep, right click, open in an integrated terminal over in the File Explorer section. Okay, now that we're here, we can write our first JavaScript. So our first JavaScript is a tradition. We are going to write console.log parentheses quotes hello world. And then we put a semicolon at the end. every letter, every space matters here. No capital on the console.log part. Make sure your parentheses are in the right spot. Make sure your quotes are in the right spot. Make sure that your parenthesis is before your quote and after your quote.
My Xcode is finally installed here. Sorry, my Xcode is finally installed here. I'm trying to do the brew steps so I can follow along now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so scroll up at 612 in the Zoom chat, and I have the all 7 steps there.
Yeah, I just followed that and it's not quite working.
Okay, share your screen. Okay, so this is after you do that step. Let me request remote. You open a new terminal. Oh, your brew did not install right. Okay. Mac password and enter. Are you sure your Xcode finished installing?
Yeah, it said finished. It said complete.
All right, I think this is going to take a second for it to go through. So let me know when this is done.
All right.
Okay. In your code, we have our console log hello world. Now we're going to execute our first JavaScript. So down in the terminal, go ahead and click down here. You'll notice you're typing after this %sign. You're going to type in the word node and then a space, and then you're going to type in playground.js. Make sure that the only space is between the word node and playground.js. And when you hit enter, you should see hello world print out in the terminal. Does anyone not have a hello world?
Mine says cannot find module.
Go ahead and share your screen.
Sorry.
It's okay. This is one of those classes where it's like we gotta get over the bumpiness, and once we do, everything rolls from here. Because your file name is JS space playground JS. So right click over on the file name and rename it to just playground.js. Yeah, you got it. Nope, you got 2 periods in there now. Okay. Okay. And then a little shortcut for you, click down in the terminal. And all you need to do is hit the up arrow, and that will automatically drop in the last command that you've used, and then enter. And
Okay.
there you go.
Thank you.
Wait,
Anyone else need
wait,
help?
wait. So when like entering like a file, you can't use JS.js.
You could, as long as it ends in .js.
Okay.
The problem there was Harley had the file was named JS space playground.js because it's a little confusing. The icon for a JS file is JS. And so it's very easy to accidentally put JS and then a space and whatever else that you need there. So whatever you put right here needs to match exactly what is up here. The problem is that spaces in the terminal don't work the way that you think that they do. You have to escape out spaces. And so putting a space in your file name is usually not a good idea. And it's just better to avoid them for now. So whatever we call this, it doesn't have to be called playground, but it shouldn't have a space in the name. So oftentimes you'll see it called script.js or index.js or server.js. Any of those are fine as long as your file name here matches whatever you put down here.
Okay, so would you recommend us using like either like Pascal case or snake case when like naming files?
JavaScript uses camel case. And so that's normally what we do, and we'll learn about camel case down the road.
Okay.
Okay, now that we're here, we can of course modify this. So in our hello world, you can type in your name is here and make sure that you are inside the quotes. These quotes are our first introduction to a string. Now, you do have to remember we got the white dot up here, so it's not going to change. We have to make sure we save. And when you save and come back down into your terminal, you can hit up, enter again, and you should see your updated string. If you don't, make sure that, again, your file is saved up here first. Okay, go back to our slides. So we just saw our first introduction to the first data type. That is what we call a string. So the computer, when it's executing the code, it needs to know, hey, are you asking me to do something? Are you asking me to run this code? Or are you just passing me some text and you want me to just treat this as text? So you can kind of think of it as a comment, right? It's some type of content that is inside of our code that we're telling the computer, I just want you to store this value. I don't really care. I don't really care for you to execute it or for you to try and understand it. So what are our other data types? Well, we get numbers, right? Numbers work the way we think they do. We just type them in. We have a Boolean, which is a special keyword, is either true or false. Again, no quotes, nothing required, no syntax around that. If you type in the word true or false, just like a number, it knows that. Strings are identified by quotes around it. In JavaScript, there are 3 ways to make a string, technically 4, but only 3 are used. They are single quotes, double quotes, or the backtick. The backtick's actually called a template literal. We'll learn about those down the road. But that is, the backtick is between tab and escape on your keyboard. And we'll learn about the power of template literals down the road. Other common data types are null and undefined. Basically, if you make a variable and don't assign a value to it, it can be null or undefined. Think about null as basically empty, right? We made something, but we didn't put anything inside of it. Objects are probably the most used, more advanced data type in JavaScript. Obviously, numbers and strings are used all the time, but objects are key value pairs. So you want to think about that as manufacturer, Toyota, model, RAV4, right? They are a way of storing data. Objects are kind of interesting because you can nest objects, you can put objects in objects, and you can also put arrays in objects or objects in arrays. So what's an array? It's just a list, and it can be of any data type. That's going to be 5, 10, 15, 20, just a list of information. That could be a list of cars that Toyota manufactures. That could be all kinds of things. So an array is a list. An object is key value pairs, basically a group of variables about one thing. Null and undefined, basically just meaning empty. Strings, which are actual letters, strings of text, strings of letters that were all put together. Boolean, true or false, and numbers. And all of those have slightly different syntaxes that we'll see in a second. Okay, so what's actually happening here? The computer is very particular in its execution. And I like to get down to this level because when we're debugging, oftentimes we write the code in a way that's different than the computer executes it. So when we write something like console.log 5 plus 10, what do we think the first thing the computer does? Well, we think it starts at the console.log, but it actually doesn't. So going back to your math days, we have PEMDAS, right? Which is order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, all of that stuff, right? Exponents, multiply, divide. The computer is executing the JavaScript in the same way. So when it gets to this line, it doesn't actually do anything with the console.log. The first thing that it sees is an operator. That plus sign is saying, hey, I need to add 5 and 10 together. So we don't see it doing this, but under the hood, it takes that 5 and 10 and goes, that's 15. Now it goes, what else do I need to know about this? What did you ask me to do with that 15? Oh, you asked me to log that out. And so what output do we see? 15. You can try that if you want in your code. You can hit enter and put in a new console.log, type in that 5 plus 10, and go to your terminal, up enter in your playground, and you will see 15 logs out. So you go to our terminal, we add a new console.log, we say any two numbers, save the file. You will see prettier also works on our JavaScript, and it also put a space in between our 7 and our 5 there for us. We go back to the terminal, we hit up enter, we still get our hello world, but now we have our sum print out. Don't worry if you think this is boring, we get much more exciting after today. Okay. Next up, we have variables. There are 3 ways of declaring a variable or initializing a variable in JavaScript. A const is short for constant. That is a value that is, like the word constant, never changing, right? Oftentimes it is preferred to use a constant variable if we don't need to change it down the road. It's an intentional decision when we initialize a variable. Hey, is this something that is going to stay the same? Or is this something that a user may update or I may need to update down the road, like a counter, right? A counter would be a let. You'll hear mutable and immutable. Immutable just means it's a constant, it can't change. Let means it's mutable or changeable value. And it can start out as undefined and we can set a value for it later, or we can declare the value right when we create it. We'll see that in a second. Var, you may, if you have written any JavaScript code before, you may have seen var. And pre-ES5 or 6, this was the only way to initialize a variable in JavaScript. So this is agreed upon that if you're writing any new code, you shouldn't use var at all. You should use let or constant. Okay, well then why do we even bring it up? Because at some point in your career, you'll be looking at an old JavaScript file and you'll be like, what is var? I've never seen that before. It's just an older version of let. Let is slightly more efficient and has some better safeguards built into it, but you should still know about var. Okay, let's play around with that. I'm going to go make 2 variables. And because these numbers aren't going to change over the course of my program, I'm going to make them a const. So we say const is the keyword so the computer knows that we want to make a new variable. We're going to name our variable. Don't get fancy with spaces here. Don't start a variable with a number. Nice and easy, num1. And then we are going to tell it num1 is going to equal some new number. We put a semicolon at the end of a line. JavaScript doesn't actually require them anymore in 99% of situations, but we still do it. We're going to hit enter, and we're going to put that on a new line. We're going to say const num2 equals some other number. And if I save this and go run the file, nothing happens. 4 plus 7, last time I checked, does not equal anything. And if I come in here and I say num1 plus num2 and run it, again, nothing happens. That is because we told the computer to add these 2 numbers together, and it was like, great, I added them. And now I'm done. Well, we need to tell the computer to log that out so we as humans can see the output. So we are going to wrap that in a console.log, and between the parentheses, we're going to put the num1 and the num2. Now that we do that, we run our node playground, and that gets us our 11 out, or whatever 2 numbers you set your num1 and num2 to.
I was gonna say you could also do it another way, put those 2 constants into in another variable and have console print out that one variable as well.
Yeah, sure could.
So the console log is pretty much saying to tell the computer to print out what's in the inside of the log parentheses.
Correct. So it's actually, without this console log, it actually is adding 4 and 7 together. And then it's going, well, you didn't tell me to do anything with it, so I'm done. So the console log is what's actually outputting it compared to the plus operator, which is actually adding them together.
Okay.
And to Cornelius's point, you could also do this. And that does the exact same thing.
It seems kind of similar to Python. I mean, I don't know if I'm right or wrong.
It is very similar to Python. Very similar.
Okay. Gotcha.
Slightly different syntax, more curly braces in JavaScript, more tabs in Python, but very similar. Only difference is Python can't run in the web browser. Okay, so let's go back to our slides here. So what's happening here? Again, important to break down. We declare our variables. The computer goes num1 and num2. I don't know what those are. So let me go find them. It does, and it goes, oh, 1 plus 2. Now it needs to evaluate that. So it logs it out. It adds them together. And then finally, it logs that out. So what happens if we mix some data types here? Well, let's do our first string. If we come into num2 here, we can put quotes around it. And if we put quotes around it and save and run it, all of a sudden my output is 47. And I'm like, why did it do that? Well, because strings are treated as text. They are no longer treated as numbers. So the computer is doing something different. It's actually doing what we call concatenation. So let's see why we would use concatenation. I can come in here and I can say, let my name equal max. Now I can console.log and I can say, hello world, put a plus there and say name is here. Don't worry that it crossed out the word name there. That's a glitch of VS Code. No, how dare you bad talk JavaScript. So we save that, we run it, and we get hello world max is here. So that plus operator is smart enough to know, hey, am I dealing with numbers or am I dealing with strings? And when we mix these data types together, it doesn't do what we think it will. It won't actually add 4 and 7 together anymore. It will treat it as concatenation. And that can be really helpful for saying, you know, good morning, username goes here. Welcome to your dashboard or something like that. So we have string concatenation. Does anyone not have some output that they were expecting? Anyone need help? Okay, let's keep going. So we got concatenation.
Sorry.
We just, oh yeah.
Oh, is it okay?
Yep.
Sorry, I was muted. My prettier's mad at me, but I'm pretty sure I put it all incorrectly.
Go ahead, share the screen. Prettier gets mad at you in JavaScript just like it does in HTML, so it is a good sign that something may be off. You are missing the closing quote after the exclamation point in hello world.
Oh, yep, I see it now. Thank you.
No problem.
Wait, I have a question too. So I followed the let name equals like some sort of string, but when I did the console log, I did the hey hello world plus name, but name is like crossed out, but it still works. Like everything still works, the same as yours, but it's just for some reason like the name is like crossed out for some reason.
Yeah, my name's crossed out too. This is a VS Code being dumb. They think that I'm using an older feature of JavaScript that's been removed. It hasn't been. Name is a perfectly fine variable name to use. But if you see it says name is deprecated, the declaration was marked as deprecated here, ignore it. It's fine. Or you could say my name as your variable name, and then it wouldn't be crossed out. Okay. We also run into comments, right? And in, we've already seen that CSS and HTML use a different syntax for comments. The same goes for our JavaScript. So we can say something in here. We can put in 2 slashes and then add in a single line comment. This concatenates strings together. Or we can put in a multi-line comment. This comment is across multiple lines. And in order to make that comment, you could put the /* in manually, or if you highlight both of those lines, oh, never mind, you put it in manually. Now, of course, VS Code is smart enough to know that we're working in a JavaScript file. So at any point, I could go to a commented line, hit Command/, and that will put that back in, that will uncomment it. And then I can hit Command/ again, and it will comment it back out. As always, make sure that you go back down to your node playground.js. Make sure that you don't have any errors, you're getting all of your output. And that means that you have seen your first half at least, of JavaScript.
Can you go over why that was equal to 47?
Yeah, so kind of the same reason that we got hello world max is here. Whenever we are adding strings together, we're concatenating. So it just basically means smush these things together. It would kind of be like saying add these 2 sentences together. And you're like, well, okay, you want me to put this next to this one, right? Well, the same goes for up here. because we put this 7 in quotes, we said 7 is no longer a number. It is a string. So we could actually put in 7 ABC here, and if we rerun it, the output is 4 7 ABC. Right? And so all we're doing is smushing things together. Right? So we could do something like this, and we see 4 as a number. This isn't 7 ABC. That is because when we put it in quotes, it is saying, I actually don't care anymore what you're going to put in here. I'm just going to treat all of these letters together until I see a closing quote. So what we couldn't do down here is say console.log some string. Well, if I run that, you see Prettier is mad at me, and it says missing parenthesis after argument list, and it highlights out some. And it's like, well, anything that you put in here, I expect to be a command. I expect to either go find that as a variable name somewhere. I expect to go add things together. I expect to be able to execute that. So in order to get it to actually print out the letters SOME space STRING, you would put that in quotes. And now the computer goes, oh, I understand. You don't want me to go find a variable. You don't want me to go add numbers together. I'm just going to treat that like text. And so because of that, run that, we get the output that we expect.
I got you. Makes sense.
Did you get your node installed finally? You're on mute.
Yes, and installed.
Okay. Go take attendance. The secret word tonight is string, STRING. And then go on break, be back at 7:25. Stick around for 1 minute in case anyone's having trouble.
The attendance password was what again?
String, STRING. It's me.
For the, I try to last time you asked me to answer and insert again, right? But when I check it for the question is still in 20.
Okay, try no, just share the screen with me.
Okay.
Request. Okay, let's try this. Let's try brew update. Brew upgrade. Didn't mean to do that, sorry. Brew. We can do brew install node then we can say, oh, wait, but that has 22.1. And it has 20. So is it just the problem of, yeah, Brew's definitely installing the latest version. Already downloaded, pouring, okay. So if we open a new tab, oh, you have NVM installed. That's why. So you installed Node not using Brew. So NVM is a Node version manager, and it's a it's a newer, it's a way of installing multiple versions of Node. So if you do install 22.10 and then NVM alias default 22.10. Now we do node V. You're good to go.
Thank you.
Yep. So oftentimes we get feedback while we're going through this. One, it's always a tough class because of all the fun of getting Brew installed and Node and all of that. But then the other part of this is this is all very not hands-on, right? It's a different way of learning, or it may be a little bit more hands-on, but it's not project-based, right? And the really tough part about this content is you can't really do projects by just concatenating strings together or setting up some variables, right? So a lot of this is kind of just getting through the content enough to be exposed to it, so that when we do get into the projects, you've got some base knowledge on it. So just wanted to provide you some context there. I know a lot of people will fill out the feedback form, and it will be one end of the spectrum or the other, right? It will be, ooh, that was a rough class, went way too quickly, couldn't keep up. And the other half of you will go, that was way too slow. I was waiting for everyone to get up to the same page. That's totally fine, right? There are some classes like that. I promise that this will all equalize out, and you will all very quickly get to the point of, okay, JavaScript is a lot harder than I thought it was now that I'm ready. I do want to call out that there are resources both in the book list, Odin Project, Free Code Camp are all really great. Wanted to throw all of those out there, but the good news is that we should be able to get through most of the slides today, which means that starting tomorrow will be more in the on Wednesday will be more on the code side of things. So reminder that tomorrow is OpenHack. We were trying to get a career thing set up beforehand, but it was a little rushed on our side and their side, so we decided to push that out until next OpenHack. So OpenHack is at 6 p.m. Common Space tomorrow. You don't have to be there at 5:30. You can get there if you want. If you have Latch access, you can use that to get in. If you don't, I will forward through the code so that you can get in there. It rarely goes until 8:30. There may be a couple people still hanging out, but plan on an hour and a half roughly there. We don't take attendance. I unfortunately won't be able to attend this OpenHack, but I really, really encourage you guys to be there, to socialize, to introduce yourselves. We've been taking cohorts there since, I don't know, cohort 3, I think. And every student who is still active in the community and has really done well has also been a big fan of OpenHack. So if you can make it, that's great. If you can't, if you have transportation, if you have childcare issues, whatever it is, you don't need to message me. You don't need to let me know, but encourage you to attend if you can. And then Wednesday, back to our regularly scheduled programming, 5:30, round 2 of JavaScript, less terminal, more hands-on projects and building fun stuff. So that's what's coming down the pipeline. Any questions on logistics? If you have not filled out your blog homework Google form project, please do that. We always have 1 or 2 stragglers at the end of that process, and it is really important. The Hack Upstate blog has a really good following, and that can be your first exposure to an employer. Really quick, only a paragraph or 2 that you need to write there. If you have any questions, reach out to Caitlin or me. And then any questions about OpenHack, like I said, I'll post the door code tomorrow. Other than that, 6 o'clock common space, 2nd floor, and it will be in like the main area there. There will be pizza, there will be alcoholic beverages and non-alcoholic beverages now in the fridge. Mike is the organizer there. Yeah, street parking's free at that time of day, so if you can park on the street, go for it. Otherwise, there are plenty of garages in the area. You've all been to common space, you know the deal. Okay, back to some JavaScript. Let me pull up.
Hang on, Max, before we get started, so just to double check, do we still sign into Zoom tomorrow or no Zoom tomorrow?
No Zoom tomorrow. And unfortunately, OpenHack doesn't have a remote option. So if you can't attend tomorrow, you are completely off. I expect you to do your homework on Free Code Camp or Odin Project and, not just drink a glass of wine and think about what you got yourself into. But, if you need that, you need that. And that's often what OpenHack is great for.
Okay. Just to double check. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we will be completely off from class tomorrow. No attendance form, no Zoom link, nothing at 5:30. Just 6 o'clock. Be down at Common Space if you can, and nothing you need to prep. Nothing. You don't need business cards. You don't need to dress fancy. You don't. It's a really chill hangout of other developers and people in the tech space. The only thing I will say is around 6:30-ish, roughly. They'll get everyone in one big circle and you kind of go around the group and introduce yourself. Hi, my name is, I'm a careers and code student. Obviously there will be a lot of you there, so you will not be alone. But if you want to think about something, a 1-sentence intro for yourself that will make you stand out from everyone else in that circle, that's a good idea. What are you most excited about learning? How's the program been going? Most of the participants there have interacted with previous cohorts as well. They may not know the curriculum as in depth, but so everyone there will have been used to careers and code experience. It's not like I'm just dumping you guys in the deep end. Okie doke. Any other questions? Okay. So we already saw strings a little bit, and we're starting to see more syntax here, right? So we can declare our strings as constants. Oh, give me 1 second, shut the door. Dog just body slammed into the door to get it to open. Oh, thank you for that. Okay, so we've seen strings before. We declared them. Again, syntax is const or let to declare a new variable. We name that variable, no spaces in those variable names. The variable names cannot start with a number. Equal for assignment to say this is what we would like to store inside of it. And then the quotes in order to say, hey, this is a string. I'm not asking you to execute this, do any calculations. I'm just giving you some text that I want to store. Strings have some interesting properties on them that we can access. Objects and arrays do as well. We'll get into those in a second. But it's often helpful to know how long a string is. And so what we are able to do is say first name dot length, and it will go, oh, let me go get first name. That means Max. I can get that dot length. And we can see, because the length comes back as a number, we can actually say name length is, and then add those two together. And because those are both numbers, it will actually do that. So go ahead and give that a try. We're going to go back to our JavaScript, and we're going to say const first name. And I mean, you know, I'm great and all, but feel free to use your own name here. Not expecting anyone to type this quickly. These are new syntax characters. You may not be used to using that equals key as much. Semicolons probably also a unused key by you by normal. So this is all practice, don't worry. And you can also lean on Prettier here a little bit for the spaces, learning all of that out. And then we can do something like my name is, or name length is. And then we are going to say first name dot length plus last name dot length. Go ahead and run that, and we should get name length is, and then however long your name actually is. Again, there is no shame in asking for help here, starting to debug. Good question about the comma. Let's see what happens if we do it with a plus. So something interesting, if we do that plus, now all of a sudden it goes, oh, you're trying to concatenate a string with a number. Well, what do we know when we concatenate strings and numbers? It just takes that text and smushes it together. So this comma is basically saying, I'm sending you what we call another parameter or argument, right? It's technically an argument. This argument is saying, hey, separate these out. Log this thing first, then log this next thing. That's how we get it all on one line. An alternative would be to do something like this. So that outputs almost the same exact thing. The difference is this is all on one line. This is all, that's two separate lines. But the reason why we can't just do a plus here is because it doesn't know, it's going to try and concatenate because the first part is a string. If we leave that comma out, it's confused because console log is expecting only one thing, or if we're sending it multiple things, it wants to know that they're separated. Still related together, but separated. So that comma is important there to say, I want you to log this out first, and then I want you to log these two numbers added together out second. Or you could also achieve that by doing two separate console logs. Michael.
I was also able to do it by just putting the parentheses inside the console log statement. So
you
just
sure can. Yeah,
Yep.
So you could do a plus and then a parenthesis here. And order of operations also applies here. So that will also achieve the same goal. Okay. Next up, we have objects. So objects are, again, a group of information, a group of variables about the same thing. And so objects are really, really helpful because we can use any kind of data type for the value. So objects, just like CSS properties had attributes and values, and same for HTML, right? We would say something like style equals, and then we would put a value in there. The same goes for objects. Objects have keys, and those keys are always strings, and then they have values. And those values can be strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, other objects. They can be any data type. So let's create our first object here. We've already done name, so let's do car. So I'll say car, and then I'm using my curly braces. And just like we have an opening tag and a closing tag in HTML, in our object, we always have an opening curly brace and a closing curly brace. For strings, we have our opening quote and our closing quote. And for arrays, we're going to have opening square bracket or braces and closing square braces. So inside that, we're going to do a key and a value, or a property and a value. So we are going to say make is Toyota, model is RAV4. Oops. And then to access those, we can say console.log car.make and car.model. And what are we going to get out? RAV4, Toyota RAV4. And of course, we can practice with this. We can say car2, going to be a make of Honda and a model of CRV. And if we wanted only CRV to come out, we could say car2.model and access CRV. And we could even get fancier here. We could say cart.model.length, and we would get 3 out. Again, following through the trickle of all of this, we are going first to the car2 and saying, okay, everything from this object is now going to show up right here. Now, what do you want from that? I want the model. So now we go back up to here, we get the model, and we go, okay, that is now CRV. So this entire thing gets crossed out, and we only are saying CRV.length. What is the length of CRV? There are 3 characters in CRV. So this entire console log becomes the number 3, and that is exactly what we see in the console. And at any step of that process, we could skip the variables altogether and say rav4.length, and we would get 4 outputted.
So wait, I got a question. So say with okay, so so you see how you have cons and then car right there, right?
Yep.
So I noticed that you can't put car like where make is at. You can't name that the car because I noticed that it'll return as an undefined. Why does it do that?
What did you have to make it undefined?
Change like the make with with next to like Toyota, yeah, and change that to car, and then it gave me undefined.
Right, because down here it's trying to look for the make inside the car. So the car is going up here, and it's saying, well, there's no make, there's only a car and a model. So because of that, we get undefined right here, because it's looking for the word, the key make inside here, and it can't find it. So if we said car.car here, that would actually go back to working. So we can call these keys anything that we want in our object, but then we have to be consistent on accessing them down here. Anyone have questions? Anyone not get their code to run? Oh, moving on. So we have the other option of accessing this with what they call bracket syntax. So there are two ways of accessing keys in objects, and dot notation or dot syntax, the one that we just used, is definitely the preferred one. We can use bracket syntax, and bracket syntax allows another level of access that we're going to see in a minute. But just to get practice with this, we are going to console.log our car make. Oop. Now we got to be careful here. This is the first time that we're seeing square brackets or braces. That is on the same key as your curly braces, just with no shift. And we still need to put the quotes in here. We are saying the key that we're trying to access is a string of make. Now we're going up to the car, looking for the make, and getting Toyota. Accomplishing the same thing as car.make, less characters to type, less syntax, which is why this dot notation is preferred over the bracket syntax. However, anyone have problems? Okay. The benefit of bracket syntax is we can actually access that information using what we call a dynamic key. So I can say what I want is equal to the model. Then I can console.log out car2 what I want and get out my CRV. Okay, how does that work? What is the difference between this line and this line? We didn't put the key in quotes. So now the JavaScript runtime engine is going, oh, you're not just saying you would like the model, you would like me to go find a variable called what I want. Well, what I want is equal to model. So I am going to take the word model right here and drop it in for where what I want is. Now you would like me to go to car2 and find the model. That model from here is CRV, and that is what is going to get console logged out, and that is what we see in the terminal. So the benefit of bracket syntax is that we can use dynamic keys instead of just a string, which we have to use for the dot syntax. And again, the only difference there is those quotes in the make here and the what I want down here. Seems simple enough, but easy to get lost in that one. And if you're going through Free Code Camp, they will drive that home of bracket syntax can be used for direct access if you pass it a string, or it can be used for dynamic keys, basically pulling in a variable to get that information. Okay. Let's talk a second about arguments. So parameters and arguments aren't technically the same thing, but for right now, knowing that they're interrelated is enough. So someone already asked about that comma, right? Well, parameters or arguments are basically what we pass to a function, whether it's a built-in function or a function that we make on our own, which we're going to see in the next step, where we pass that number in so that the function knows what our input is. It's basically the way to provide input and have the same code run over and over again with different inputs so that we get the expected output. So first parameter is just whatever comes between the parentheses here, and then a comma for any subsequent parameters. We can have any number of parameters as long as the function is expecting those parameters to get passed in. We'll see that in a second. Parameters can also be numbers so that we can pass that in. Console.log just happens to be the only function that we have seen so far. So, any questions about parameters? We've already used them, so I don't think we need to practice typing them out. We'll see more about that in 1 second. We also have if statements. So the syntax here is the keyword if, then we put parentheses in and we list out conditions. And we say, hey, if this thing is true between these parentheses, then we go to the curly braces and we say, do all of the lines of code between those curly braces. But those curly braces will only run if that condition is true. So let's see that. We also can do an else statement. If this thing is true, then run the code between the first curly braces. Otherwise, go do this other code down here instead. Also realizing I haven't shared this slideshow link, so I will do that. It is linked in the daily outlines. Okay. And the final variation of an if statement is an if, else, if, else. And we can have as many of these else ifs that we want, but this can be really helpful for saying, check for this, and check for this, then check for this. And if any one of these is true, go do the code right after between the curly braces. And then if none of that is true, go do the else statement. And the else statement is optional, just like we saw here. We can do an if statement. We can chain as many else if statements as we want. And then this else is also optional. Okay, let's go play around with that. So I'm going to say, let num3 equal 6. And we will say, if num3 is less than 10, console log, oh good, a small number. Else if num3 is greater than or equal to 10, and we'll get fancy. 2 ampersands means and num3 is less than 100, console log eq, a larger number, else console log huge number. When we log that, we get, oh good, a small number, and then we can play around with that. We can change our number at any point, run it, and get huge number. So I will leave that on the screen for a second. You type that out. Oh, sorry, Terry, go ahead.
So, so my question is, so I type like if, and there's another thing called if else. My, so is if else is the same as else if, or are they two separate things?
So what this is saying is if this is true, do this thing, and I won't even check the rest of these. However, if this is not true, go check to see if this thing is true. If it is, go do this, and I don't care about this. However, if this is not true and this is not true, then do this no matter what. What we could have also done, this would have also been valid. So else ifs are not required, but they are a way for us to change some conditions here and say if this one is true or this one is true, then it won't ever run this code. So it's basically a conditional, right? To say, based off of this, conditionally go do this other thing. It's just a way to skip over lines of code and say, based off of some conditions, go do this thing.
So pretty much taking a different path, like say, hey, if this is less than this, then this will come out as this door. But if it's some other thing, it'll go to the other door.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And we can even nest if statements. We can have an if statement in an if statement. If this thing is true, then go figure out if this thing is true or this thing is true. Kind of like tree logic, right? Where based off of different conditions. So you can nest if statements in each other, just like you can nest divs in each other. You could just write another if in here and, go from there. So you definitely can nest within curly braces. And we've already seen we can also chain conditions as well and say, well, it's got to be this and this. The other thing we can do is an or statement. If this is true, or this is true, or this is true, and the or is going to be the horizontal bar, which is the key under delete. We use 2 of those for or. Anyone have questions on if statements or any syntax errors, any problems where their code didn't run? Okay. Moving on to arrays. So arrays are kind of like objects in that they can store a list of data. So what's different about an object is it's always a key and a value, compared to arrays, which are indexed by number. And what is kind of different in JavaScript compared to some other languages is that it starts at 0. So if you would like the first item in the list, you actually want the item at index 0. So we can even store objects inside of an array. So let's play around with that a little bit. I'm going to say const fruits equals apple, banana. Thank you, Gwen Stefani. And orange. Now to access one of those, I can console.log my fruits, and now my square bracket is going to come back, and I'm going to say fruits 0. What does that print out? Apple. Because again, these are 0 indexed. And arrays has a length property as well. So I can say fruits.length, and that is going to tell me the number of items in that array. You will notice that length is not 0 indexed. So the length did not come back as 2. It came back as 3 because there are 3 items in the array. Yet, if I wanted orange to come out, I would say 0, 1, 2. It's the second index, even though it's the third item. So I put 2 here, and now I get orange out. Let's do one more example. I will say const cars. Now I'm getting fancy. I'm putting in an object inside my list. So square syntax, square bracket for an array, because it's a list, because it's an array, it is indexed first, and we always access that index using the bracket notation. Then we also can store objects inside of our array. Objects, again, key value pairs, and we know it's an object because it has the curly brace. So how would we get to something like the Honda? We would say console.log cars, and it's always peeling back layers of the onion. So the first thing that we run into is the array. So I go, I don't want the 0 index. I'm trying to get to the word Honda. So I want the 1 index, the second item. So I'm going to say cars bracket 1. And if we run that, we see we get an object out of Honda CRV, but I only wanted Honda to come out. So I'm going to switch to my bracket, to my dot notation and say dot make. Now I save, I come over, I run it, and now I get Honda out. And I do have these on the slides as well, so feel free to review them tonight, or when you're bored at OpenHack, just sit in the corner and cry into my slides. No, I'm just kidding. Please go socialize, it's important. I'm good. Nope, making good progress here. I'm going to head into a for loop next. So a for loop is a way to make our code repeat. And for loops are really helpful when we know the number of times we want that loop to basically run. So for loops get into some kind of funky syntax here. So we want to break this down. So we say the keyword for, just like const or let. OpenHack is tomorrow. It's the second Tuesday of every month. Yes, Terry. Although sometimes they move it, so it's not a hard and fast rule, but it is scheduled for tomorrow on Meetup, so I'm pretty sure it is tomorrow. Okay, so a for loop. We use the keyword for, and then we break this down into parentheses. And so the parentheses part is broken out into 3 parts. What we call the initializer of the iterator, right? So we say let I equals 1. We've already seen that before. Let is starting a new variable. We can call I anything, but traditionally, we always call it I. And then we say, what do we want I to start at? So we say we want I to start at 1. Okay, semicolon. So now first part is done. Where are we starting our loop? We're starting I at 1. Now, what do we want to happen? How often do we want to run this loop? We want to run this loop while I is less than or equal to 10. That's the conditional. That's basically an if statement that's controlling whether this loop runs or not. Okay, what's after that? What do you want me to do with I when we are done running the first time of this loop? I want you to add 1 to I plus plus is the equivalent of saying, take whatever I is and add 1 to it, and that is now the new value of I. Once we get those 3 parts done, it is going to say, what would you like me to do? So the first time this loop runs, it goes, I is now 1. Is 1 less than or equal to 10? It is, so it pauses, it skips over this for now, and it does this part. So it's going to log out, this loop has now run 1, because 1 is I, times. Now it's going to hit this curly brace, and it's going to go back up, and it's going to go I plus plus. I is now 2. Okay, is 2 less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. So we go back into this curly brace. We do the loop has now run 2 times. We go back. We add 1 to I, 3, all the way up until it is 10. 10 is less than or equal to 10. It will log out. This loop has now run 10 times. I now becomes 11. We check, is 11 less than or equal to 10? It is not. So it will hit this final curly brace and go run any code that's beneath it and then stop. So let's practice with this. Lots of little syntax in here. So we're going to say for curly braces, we're going to let I equal 1 because we need to be incrementing that. We're going to say, well, I is less than or equal to 5, I plus plus. Then we are going to console log num times run and drop in our I there. And if we run that, we will see this prints out 5 times because this line of code has run 5 separate times.
Quick question. How did you get your those numbers to show up in yellow? Like my 3 from like showing the array length and the rest of my numbers that I've used tonight have been in yellow. I don't know why those are there.
Maybe because I have does yours say ZSH up here or does it say bash?
It says ZSH.
I probably have a theme installed and don't remember how I installed it. While you guys are practicing that code, let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, because the rest of the numbers I've used are all in yellow. I don't know why that specifically in the for loop, the numbers aren't.
You have a comma, not a plus.
Oh, well, that might be it then.
Good, I don't have a theme installed that I forgot about.
That did it.
I mean, achieving the same result, it's just bash is detecting a number instead of a number that is in a string. All right, we do have another variation of a for loop. This is kind of the loop that we did is what we call a classic iterator for loop. This is a for of loop. And I will show you one other loop type, which is called a while after this, but I want to say that this is not the only 2 types of for loops. These are the 2 types that we'll use the most. So what's kind of interesting is when Ryan comes in to instruct, he may use a different kind of for loop, and you start to see when you start reading other people's JavaScript, you start learning about different variations that are out there, right? However, the vast majority of the code I write, I find either a classic for loop or a for of loop, the 2 types of loops that I use the most. So I just want to throw out there that there are other types of loops out there, not just for loops, but other kinds. We'll see a while loop next, but let's practice with this one. We already have our fruits up here, so we can access that directly. We can say for const fruit of fruits. So what is that doing? That's saying fruits, I need to come up here to this array. Now, the first time that this array, this loop runs, it's going to take apple and stick it in fruit. Then it's going to do whatever is in my curly brace. Going to hit the end curly brace. It's going to go back up to fruits. It's going to say, I already did apple. Now take banana and stick banana in fruit. So I can say console.log, I really like plus fruit plus the letter S. Go ahead and run that, and I will get, I really like apples, I really like bananas, I really like oranges. So for of loops are most helpful when running over arrays. You can use a for in loop to run over objects. However, a for of loop is one of the most powerful ones. You also can write a loop that uses .length up here to iterate over an array, but because looping over every item of an array is such a common thing that we do, we have this syntax here where we don't need to get into numbers. It just will automatically detect the length of the array, then load up for every iteration of the loop into this variable here.
You might have missed something that you could have just explained there. You declared a new variable of each item in the array. I see.
All right, everyone a little fruity now? Okay. I'm not going to make you guys type this out, but a while loop is kind of like a for loop. Oftentimes when we write a while loop, it will run for an indeterminate number of times. The idea, though, is basically the same here. The let I equals part is not required, but the while loop is going to say, while this condition is true, I'm going to go do this code. Oftentimes in a while loop, or almost always in a while loop, you will need something changing in the loop itself to make the condition no longer true. So it's very easy if we forget this I++ part to write what we call an infinite loop, where this loop is I will never be greater than 10. And because of that, that loop will run forever. We obviously don't want that. That causes the computer to freak out. So when we write while loops, we have to be very careful before we execute them to make sure that whatever this condition is will eventually no longer be true based off of some condition that we're changing inside the loop itself. I'm not a big fan of while loops. I very rarely see them in production code. In practice, they're a little simpler to write. However, very rarely do we use them. We usually use for loops or for of loops because they're a little bit harder to write an infinite loop. Okay, we also have something called try catch. I promise we are nearing the end of these slides. So a try catch is basically we told the computer to do something. It didn't know it was wrong at the time of us writing it. And then when we go to execute it, we have what we call a runtime error. So when we have a syntax error, right, if we forget a comma or forget a closing quote or whatever it is, before we even run the code, we can know prettier is like, something's missing here. You got to go fix that. But sometimes we will write code that we don't know is wrong until we go to execute it. This is a really good example of that. We said for let I start at 0 because arrays are 0 index. So apple would be 0. Well, I is less than 4. Okay. Console log out fruits bracket I. So we are using a dynamic key here. And we are saying, okay, I is 0. So log out apple. Now add 1 to I. I is now 1. 1 is less than 4. Fruits 1 is orange. Log out orange. Okay. Now I was 1. We add 1 to it. I is now 2. 2 is less than 4. 2 fruits banana. Okay. Add 1 to I. I is now 3. 3 is less than 4. So it's going to go to fruits and go 0, 1, 2, 3. There is no thing in index 3. So that will actually throw an error. And we call it throwing an error because we're going to try some code. And if whatever is between these curly braces is going to throw an error, we are going to catch that error and call it E. Then we can console log, hey, something went wrong with our code. So this is really helpful whenever we're working with user inputted information. We're trying to do this thing, and we want to tell the computer, hey, this may error out, but if it errors out, we don't want you to throw up your hands, throw an error, and call it a day. We may be able to predict that that error is going to happen. And so when that error gets thrown based off of whatever code is in between the curly braces of the try, we are going to catch that error and do something between these two curly braces if something goes wrong. Hopefully self-explanatory. Try catches are a little bit more advanced in JavaScript. I don't know that we ever use one in our project. I think we do just as an example, but more of a concern when you're building your own APIs and you may try and like add two numbers together and it turns out that the user inputted a string. You have to deal with that kind of thing. So that's the try catch. Okay, parameters, we already saw these. And I am actually going to save functions for tomorrow, because if I tried to teach you functions right now, I think your brains would just implode. Nothing's going to sink in at this point. So I am going to call it there and actually let you out of class a little early. You can tell everyone at OpenHack tomorrow that you are super excited to learn about functions, and that's as far as you've gotten in JavaScript. Come on, you can feign a little enthusiasm for me because I won't be there tomorrow. So have an awesome evening. If you guys would like to review these slides, you are more than welcome to stick around for a couple minutes and generate any questions. But otherwise, GTFO, have fun at OpenHack, and I will see you all on Wednesday. And I will stick around for Joe, your question, and for any other questions that may pop up.
All right, so for the open hack, you said it starts at 6?
6 tomorrow, yes.
6 tomorrow.
Second
Okay.
floor of Common Space, and if you don't have Latch access, I will post the access code tomorrow in Slack.
Okay, all right. It works. I'm trying to think of another. Well, this one's more personal. I can Slack you that in a bit if that works for you.
Yep, totally fine.
All right. You guys all have a blessed day. Well, actually, no, I have another question. So this is like from your perspective as a programmer, you know, from like, I think we talked about this, just like learning one language to another. Is it always best to just focus on one language and you're set and you know all languages, or is it best to dip your toes into different languages as you're going, like progressing?
JavaScript's the best language. You don't need to learn any others. And you should just tell everyone at OpenHack that tomorrow and see what their reaction is.
Gotcha. Because I my first 2 years of like hands-on programming was with C#, and I was very accustomed to that. And I was just wondering.
So
like,
I
in
would
your
say,
years.
my opinion, especially if JavaScript's your first scripting language or your first real programming language outside of HTML and CSS, this course is a good threshold for when you're ready for another language. So I don't recommend anyone spend time in the languages other than JavaScript throughout this program, because there are a lot of concepts that we'll explore in JavaScript that you won't necessarily explore in other languages. The document object model, the HTML DOM, is something that only JavaScript has. And it's, you know, interacting with the page content. is something that only JavaScript does, and so I'm like, just stick to JavaScript all the way through. There are also full stack web development concepts that you may not get in another course that is focused more on the language itself, because the that course is like, I'm going to teach you everything about this one language and then you're good to go. But it may not teach you the concepts of how to write JavaScript to connect to the database, or how to write a method that is accessed via an endpoint over a REST API, or right. So there are certain full stack web development concepts that are not part of computer science as a whole. However, once you get those concepts down, even if you haven't completely mastered them by the end of the course, you'll at least know enough about them to say, oh, in JavaScript, they call that an object, but in Python, they call that a dictionary. Both are using key value pairs. They both use strings to access values. Okay, Python just happens to call it a dictionary, right? That's totally fine. So the end of this course, I think, is a good threshold to go, what do I want to learn next? And how comfortable am I feeling in JavaScript? Because we have a lot of students come out of this and go, I want more JavaScript practice. I got all the concepts, but I'm not confident writing it on my own. I'm going to go do a community college course in JavaScript computer science. We hook you up with CNY Works and Working Solutions. And Working Solutions has some money available to you for additional community college courses. That's a really great option. A lot of people come out of this and they go, I hated JavaScript. I want to go learn Python. I want to go see how it's done in another language. So we encourage you to learn other languages, and a lot of employers will be flexible and go, well, if you know JavaScript well enough, we'll teach you Python on the job, or whatever language it is. But I would encourage you to not go down that path until after graduation, but encourage you to go down that path after graduation as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. I won't hold you up because there's a lot of people in line to get your help. So everyone have a blessed day.
Joe, you are up next.
Yes, potentially a quick situation here. Okay. So I was trying to use gutters for this section. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay. I was trying to use gutters for here. And going off, I don't know if it was in the index section that we tried. Yeah. So it works this way where you're trying to separate these three columns. I think if we go back here, that works there. Despite I think the borders around a different thing here, but the concept still should work.
So that's actually the problem, is that the border is applied to, if you scroll down a little bit in this code, you can, let me just request remote. So for index, where did we apply that border? Border, we put it on the product, which was up here. Yeah, so for this one, the border is on not on the column div itself, it's on a div with inside the column. So we have to do this same thing in here. We basically have to put the whatever the border is on, whether it's on the call or the credit card info, we need to put another wrapper div in here for that. Because the gutter here is weirdly getting applied, but it's getting applied. Let me just expand this out a little bit more. So you see how there's a little tiny bit of green on the left and right side of name?
Yeah.
If we come in here and change that gutter to like a 10 gutter, you will see that name moved a little bit. That gutter is actually getting applied here, but it's getting applied as padding. Padding is inside the border, so the border isn't changing. It's just making the content grow out.
So could I just attach the border to like the paragraph tags then?
Yeah. We could even say attach it to the P tags inside the credit card info. And now
I
you can
see. There we
see
go.
the gap there. And then, of course, if we shrink that back down to a 2, it closes the gutter.
Okay. All right.
So
That's
gutter is really
more
weird because we
sense
would
now.
think of gutter as margin, but it's actually padding. And because it's padding, we can't see the gutter in effect because it's inside the border, not outside the border.
Gotcha. All right. I think that was all I had for that.
All right. Who's next?
I just had a question about the thing I did in the beginning. I'm not sure. I believe I did it correctly. It looked like it was working, and then I kind of got lost. So I was just like,
Okay.
I'm just gonna leave it where it off. I think it's
It's the hardest thing to follow in all of our classes, so completely fine to get lost there. Go ahead and share your screen and I can do a quick test.
okay.
And I'm going to request remote. And so basically, if you can type this in and that comes out, you did everything right, which is a miracle because I put in about 4 wrong instructions that you didn't have to suffer through.
Okay. All right. I was just making sure because it was working and I just wasn't sure how it was supposed to show. And like I was sharing my screen and I wasn't like, is this right? I don't even know. And then
Yes.
I'll rewatch the video.
Yeah, so because you have that installed, now you can go into VS Code. And if you right click in here, yep, so right click on Playground.js and open an integrated terminal.
Yep, I did that.
Yep, now you can type in node space playground.js. And because you did all of those other steps right, it now knows what node is and can actually run your code. And so,
That's what I was getting.
here we did, we said const sum equals num1 plus num2. And now you're fully in operation.
All right, so I had them in the parentheses and I didn't need the parentheses. Oh, well.
No, I added this line in. I said, what is sum equal to? It's now equal to num1 plus num2. It was just showing that there's another way of adding numbers together and storing them in a variable.
Okay, I think I get it. I'm gonna watch the video over though. Thank you.
Yeah, all of this code is kind of like really dumb when you're like, well, yeah, okay, like, but why would I ever need to do that? So a lot of this code is kind of just getting the principles across, and then starting either on Thursday or I have to look at the schedule, but we will get back into projects where we use all of these concepts. So if it doesn't sink in this time around, that's okay. This is just exposure to it. When we get into the projects, it will click a little bit more.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Asma, did you have a question?
Yes, I just had a question about the intro blog. I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure I submitted because I got the thanks for submitting page. I'm not sure if you went to the last cohort page. I don't know if I clicked on C5 or C6. But I got a little message saying that I need to submit it again from Karen, so I'm not sure where that went.
His blog. While I look into this, are there any other questions? Okay, you definitely didn't do it for the one this cohort linked in Canvas.
Yeah, I probably clicked on the wrong one and I submitted for the wrong one last night. Is there like any
So
way like it notifies you for previous ones? Or do I have to resubmit again? Either way is fine. I just don't have what I wrote saved because it's different from last year.
oh, it's not in here. Let me go to the last cohort. So you can imagine we have a lot of Google files and a lot of Google Forms. Program execution. Form submissions. No, it's not there.
It's okay if you can't find it. I can just retype
Oh,
it
you know
and
what I can do? I can go to cohort 5 this way, and then go assignments, intro blog. Account. I gotta go sign into my other user account. I'll send you a Slack message.
sounds good. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions?
Yeah, Zachary had a question. She said, can you re-explain the con fruit of the fruit example?
Of the what example? Of the fruit?
Yeah, the for loop fruit.
This one in particular?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So fruits we already defined up here. So it's going to use that as the data. And it's basically going to say the first time that this loop runs, because we are getting all of the fruit of the fruits, we are going to load the singular fruit up with whatever the first item of the array is. So it's going to take apple and it's going to store apple in fruit. Then it is going to console log out, I really like fruit, which is apple because it was the first item. It will throw an S on it, and the first thing that it logs out is I like apples. Then it's going to hit this curly brace. It's going to go back up to our fruits. It's going to get the next fruit of banana, drop banana into fruit, print out I really like bananas. And then it will do the final one. It will get orange. It will drop orange in there. Then it will hit fruits and go, there are no more items here. So I've done all of the loop iterations and I would run any code underneath it if there were any.
Yeah, thanks for that, Max. So actually the logic did make sense. I was just surprised that the computer, or rather the terminal, understood the syntax of the singular because it wasn't necessarily explicitly defined, if that makes sense. I didn't know that it could pick up on the fact that fruit was a singular. And
so it doesn't. We could actually call this anything.
Okay, then
so
awesome,
really
great.
Good question. Yeah, we could call this const I of fruits, and as long as we use I here, it would pick up apple, bananas, and oranges.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm more familiar with, like the I, but that totally makes more sense. It's as if we skipped essentially defining, well, actually it wouldn't.
Yeah,
well, we couldn't have
yeah.
Okay, awesome, thank you so much, because I was like, wait, how? But okay.
So that's actually a pet peeve of mine of calling it I. Like I teach it because it is obviously what everyone uses, I for iterator or I for index, either one. And then, but I've written for loops that are 8 levels nested deep. So you go, oh, I, J, K, L, and then you get down to L and you're like, wait, what was I looping over for L?
Exactly.
And then you do L, M++, M is not defined, or you get in. So for me, I actually never call this I would call this like num runs, and then say num runs plus, and then num run.
Okay, yeah.
Right, and that's what I prefer when I define a loop. But obviously, this is a lot more letters, so like I is what you see more of. So when I do a for loop, if there is any level, if I'm doing any for loop in a for loop, I never use I, but if it is a basic for loop where I'm just I plus plusing it, I will call it I, but I tried to be explicit here. It's easier to get lost in saying something like fruits here by accident and then getting the whole thing to print out. But it does kind of make sense, right? Of, well, if I'm looping over a list of things, I want the one thing. And so that's why I try to do plural versus singular. Easier to get lost in which one to use, but easier to keep track of what is in that thing that you're iterating over.
Right, and 100%. And I think that just explain after the explanation is made, then it makes sense. But just I don't know if anyone else thought of this question, but I was just thinking, like I just needed some explanation.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great question. And if you remind me on Wednesday, I can touch on that before we dive into functions.
Awesome, thank you so much. Thanks.
Of course.
And thanks, Terry, for bringing my question back up. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So my question is, you mentioned like people like learning like different languages like Python, for example. So would it benefit for someone to learn like a different programming language to learn like JavaScript? Will it be like easier for them, or will it be kind of like
Absolutely,
hard?
very much easy. Because we're going through all of these concepts, but the concepts that we're going over tonight, you can kind of count like roughly 10 of them, right? Like variables and loops and functions and concatenation and data types and right. But that list exists in almost every programming language. And that list is the same for every programming language has a variable. Every programming language has loops. Every program, right? Like that is a And so, like I said, they may be called different things, but as you start using them, you're like, oh, that makes sense. It's not called dot length, it's called dot items, or like there are slight differences there. But I would also say you don't want to learn a language just for the sake of learning a language. So you want to learn a language either because hopefully an employer has said, well, if you learn this language, we'll hire you. That's a great reason to learn a language. Or if there's something, for example, you can do a lot of data analytics in Python because R is I think it's a programming language. If not, it's a framework. But it's very similar to the Python syntax. And so because R is so popular, if you ever want to go into data analytics, it just makes sense to learn R because everyone in data analytics has agreed R is the language or the framework to use for that. So it's one of those things where you don't want to like just learn languages for the sake of putting them on your resume. You want to learn a language because you've got a project in mind and that project would be better benefited from a particular language.
Okay. Yeah. I was noticing like objects. I think object was the one for like the dictionary, I think.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So in my head, I'm like, okay, object reminds me of dict because I use Python. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting more familiar with I'm catching on, especially with the for loops. I'm like, yeah, I got to do this for loop, while loop. We only use while loops if it's necessary. We don't need to use them. I like that because you can call it like an infinite loop and stuff like that. So I just had to make sure like so JavaScript shouldn't be like too hard for me. Well, I mean, I don't know, maybe I don't know.
Well, the only part of JavaScript that will be different is like, have you built any user interfaces in Python?
I don't think so.
Okay, so that will be the only different part is that in Python you have to like lay everything out in pixels, and it's a pain, and why most people don't build user interfaces in Python itself. Like Python's a great language for scripting, not a great language for building something visual, basically. And so what's different in JavaScript is that JavaScript, you don't build interfaces in either. You build them in HTML, and then just like we hook our CSS into our HTML, we're going to hook our JavaScript into our HTML as well. And so that will be a little new for you because we won't just be running our JavaScript in Node. We'll actually be writing all of our JavaScript, at least in the first couple weeks, to interact with our HTML pages. So that will be a little new for you, but the good news is yes, it will be a lot easier for you because the syntax is a little different, but at the end of the day, you're already looking at this and being like, oh, okay, they use curly braces instead of tabs, but that makes sense, right? Or they don't use colons or that kind of stuff. I used Python 7 years ago and haven't used it since. So I do everything in JavaScript. So I would certainly not say I am an expert in Python anymore, but that I was hired for my job because our first application was written in Python. And I said, well, I know enough JavaScript, I'll pick up Python. And sure enough, I did. So it's one of those things where I think of it more of a dialect than an entirely separate language, right? So if you go to England right now, could you understand what they were saying? Well, sure. You order fish and chips and expect French fries, or you'd expect potato chips and get French fries, but you could still understand them. You wouldn't get over there and feel like you were in danger. Same thing kind of goes here, right? Well, bless your heart means something different in the South than it means, up here. But we would still understand it. And I think the same thing goes for programming languages, where by the end of this course, you could show anything you had written to someone in Python, and they would look at that and go, well, maybe I don't know this particular keyword, or why does it say DICT here? But at the end of the day, they would be able to figure it out. And that's kind of how I cross compare languages.
Okay. I don't think Turtle counts as a user interface, does it? Like, because I use Turtle before with Python when I was you didn't
No,
know?
that's more for like vector generation. I'm thinking more like, file edit, I can click this button, it shows this form field, that kind of stuff in Python.
Oh no, I didn't do none of that. Like the only thing I did with Python was I did functions, and with that function I did okay, so I want the function to create a file named max, and then with inside of that file max, I want inside of it, I want the text to be, hey, I'm Max. How are you? Like, that's the only thing I like really did. That and booleans and if else. That's why when I had a question about the if else, like I was like, it looked kind of different, like, else, and then that if, and then that else if, because I'm so used to like if else, like it's just I'm just so all over the place.
Yeah, little differences, and pretty much anything you can build in Python, you can build in JavaScript. Anything you can build in JavaScript, you can build in Python. Python was first to server-side programming, so Node came out a little bit later. And once Node came out, JavaScript had kind of caught up to Python in what you can accomplish with it. Just like Python couldn't run in a web browser, and you couldn't interact with HTML and that kind of stuff. So at this point, both languages are pretty on par. And because I'm more of a JavaScript expert, and because you can use JavaScript in both the browser and the backend for building APIs, that's why we teach it. But even if we didn't use it for the backend, we would still have to teach it for interacting with HTML and making things work in the web browser. With all of that said, if you forced me today to pick another language to teach our curriculum in, it would be Python, hands down. Python's a little bit more beginner friendly on syntax, right? You don't get wrapped up in curly braces versus parentheses versus square braces as much. Indentation's easier to understand, colons, all that kind of stuff. So Python definitely has some benefits to it, but it would be the alternative if I weren't teaching JavaScript.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only question I have today. I don't want to keep you up for too long.
All good. Have a good night.
You as well. Thank you.